Good evening. I'd like to call the City of Menasha Administration Committee meeting to order. Clerk Galeazzi, could we have roll call, please?
Alderman Tom Grotti. Here. Alderman Ted Grotti. Here. Alderman Rapella.
Here.
Alderman Nichols.
Here.
Alderman Taylor. Here. Alderman Sevenik.
Here.
Alderman Kruger.
Here.
Alderman Langdon is absent.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda this evening is to approve the minutes from the Administration Committee meeting on June 18th, 2018. Do we have a motion? Alderman Kruger? There you go.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I would like to make a motion to approve the Administration Committee minutes of 6/18/18.
We have a motion and a second from Alderman Ted Grotti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Minutes, we have
Minutes? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm good.
all aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We have one action item this evening, and that is Resolution 2118, a resolution approving the application to borrow, to the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands to borrow $3,890,000 from the state trust funds and authorize the borrowing and the issuance of certificates of indebtedness and levying a tax in connection therewith. And this is introduced by Mayor Merkus. Director Jacobs, would you tell us a little bit more about what is included in this and why it's here this evening?
The reason it's here is that we are looking to reimburse the city for the 2017 CIP budget year. There were a number of projects that were undergone last year, and they were wrapped up with some bills that were paid in early 2018. And now that we're 99% of the way through the 2017 audit, which will be coming to you in a couple weeks from now, and with myself being new, coming on board in August, with Director Radomski coming on board in August, we wanted to have a good grasp of what the dollar amount was in the different projects and have a good handle on those before we actually went to the state trust fund loan to do the borrowing for the 2017 year. As I had put in my memo, you did previously on November 21st of 2016, you had an original borrowing resolution for the 2017 CIP year of $1,987,000. And after we've got through all the projects, got through year end, and with the reconciliation with the year end audit, the dollar amount that was necessary to complete the borrowing was $1,779,457. So that was a reduction of $207,709. So there was a good reason for us not to, I guess, borrow in my first or second month here, or the Public Works Director too early in the process. Let the projects go through for us to get comfortable with all the different funding sources and with some of the budget adjustments that came through for the Little Loop, the Lake Bridge, for the Broad Street project and things, so that we wanted to make sure we had a good handle on those. So the borrowing amount is a little bit lower than what your previous resolution was at budget time at the end of 2016. Then for 2018, a borrowing year, we have got the Main Street project is pretty much wrapped up and completed. The fire truck has already been purchased and bought, and we've already paid that to the city, our share to the city of Neenah for it. And a couple of other projects are already underway. We thought there's no reason to delay borrowing another couple months. So for the total projects for 2018 CIP year that were previously approved back in November 2017 was for a borrowing amount of $2,110,543. So with the 2 years combined, we're looking at a borrowing issue that we are looking to present to the state and to the city council for approval in 3 weeks of $3,890,000. With that, there's also reason to not delay the borrowing any longer because we know interest rates are climbing. The interest rate right now is 4.25%. It held going into from second quarter into third quarter. I'm anticipating it's going to jump up at some point before year end. So if we would wait another 3 months, 4 months, or wait till year end to do the borrowing for the 2018 piece, we're going to get stuck with a little bit higher interest cost. And we're still doing this typically the way you've done it is these general obligation issues for your standard borrowing have been over a 10-year process. With us not requesting the funds until after September 1st of this year. We do not even have to make a debt service payment in 2019's budget year. It won't be until 2020. So that would be the first year. With this borrowing here, we won't have to make a principal or interest payment until 2020's budget year, and then we have to be completed and paid off in full by March of 2028. So that's the plan right now. And then on, just for your information on where our debt level is presently with this borrowing issue, at the end of the 2017 year, you were at $31,882,000 for general obligation debt. We are paying off about $4.2 million in this budget year during 2018. And so with us adding $3,890,000, that means that the principal payment rate, or the principal outstanding for general obligation, would drop down to $31,573,000, and that would put us at a general obligation debt limit of 56.53%, which at the end of last year was at 57.08%. So we are continuing to be paying off more debt than you are taking on. Our general obligation debt limit continues to drop, and all the way back to 2013 that I could get my hands on when I first started, you were at 80.56%. So your general obligation debt limit against your equalized valuation of the city has continued to drop roughly from 80% in 2013 now down to 56.53%. So we've done this all. You've done this all over the last 5 years, very systematically, very organized, and doing restructuring of debt as best you can.
Thank you for that explanation. Just to follow up, for this borrowing includes 2017 capital improvement costs. Those are projects already completed.
Correct.
And the 2018 projects, some of them are completed and others we anticipate completion this year yet.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I will look for a motion to forward the resolution to the council and then open the floor to any questions or discussion. Alderman Grady? Ted Grady?
I'd rather have some questions before we make a motion.
That was my idea too. Can we ask a question before we make the motion?
Sure.
Question, John. On that interest rate, seemed 4.25? Seems kind of high, but was it locked in at a different rate, or they can't really do anything until you decided to borrow the money?
Well, the interest rates have been rising since you last
Right.
borrowed. I think you were like at 3.75%, so it has gone up a whole 0.5% since you last borrowed, which was in January of 2017. So that one is locked in at a lower rate. However, we know interest rates are going to continue to rise for a little while, and until we can pay down a little bit more of our debt and get a little bit more of the steam plant debt paid off, we probably won't be able to go out in the market to get a little bit lower interest rate yet than we presently are. But my projection is that if we stay on track and work on our fund balance policy, making sure we've got enough reserves on hand, and continue to watch this general obligation debt limit continue to fall, as you have been doing the last 5 years.
Right.
We could eventually go to Moody's and do an actually going out on the borrowing on the market for general obligation debt and get a lower interest rate than what the state would offer at the 4.25. We probably could be somewhere maybe in the 3.5 range, but we're not able to do so just at this time yet.
Okay.
But it's a goal, a strategic goal in the next,
No.
hopefully less than 5 years to get there.
Right, okay. Thank you for the explanation.
Alderman Sevenick?
Thank you, Chair. Can you help me out with the fire burn build upgrade? I know it's like the smallest amount on there, but I'm drawing a blank. Was that our share? Okay. And if anyone should know, it should be me, because I chaired that committee, but
I'm not sure what that amount was, John.
it's only $1,384.
Yeah, and that was part of probably Menasha's share, because I know the Nina PD kicked in like 14,000 towards it as well. and that was so we could use it jointly.
Right, so they could use it.
Yep,
Yep.
yep.
And so, but this would be our 39% obligation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, this one is for Josh. So, in the 2018 capital borrowing estimates, we have the Broad Street, which has been topic that we've been dealing with the last month or so with the land acquisition and engineering. And you said before, it doesn't cover the engineering cost and, but, is most of that money engineering and not necessarily land acquisition? Do you have a breakdown?
I believe that the number was, we anticipate about 25,000 in engineering and about 35,000 total for land acquisition. We had to pay a consultant to do the land acquisition, and that was, I want to say, about $20,000 for the consultant, and then about 15,000 for the actual land acquisition and recording fees.
What land acquisitions did we have with this?
We had the temporary limited easements. So in order to be able to work on private property, and to do grading on private property, the DOT requires temporary limited easements. It's a DOT policy where they have to offer to purchase it from each property owner that's affected. And that's where that money is coming from.
How many property owners are we talking about?
I think it was roughly 30.
30?
So there were quite a few, I mean, it's pretty much every property owner on Broad Street.
If the council would indulge me for a second here, I just want to figure something out. Oops. Okay. I get like 18,000.
The consultant was about 20,000, just for the consultant, and then each property had its own fee, which ranged from, I think the lowest one was about $300, and the highest was almost $1,400.
Oh, so there were vast differences.
Yes, it all depended on how much property they had to take from that particular.
So this is almost like
entity.
an opposite of having a street done. In my case, I'd be assessed, and then these people are actually getting a check.
It's
I don't understand that.
It's the way that the DOT justifies being able to grade on people's property. Unfortunately, this is a DOT project, so
How
we
is
don't
it their
have.
property? I don't understand how,
Because it's going behind the sidewalk onto private
it
property.
is going behind
Yes.
the sidewalk.
Yes, they are going about 2 or 3 feet back behind the sidewalk in many cases. You know,
Into their yards, that far back? Why would they have to do that?
due to the grades of the sidewalk, and they
The
just have to
terraces are
match.
huge. They're probably 10 feet. Wow, okay. I'm puzzled by that, but thank you, Chair, for allowing me to go a little further with that. I did have one more other question. I can't think of it at the time. I'll let other council members speak at this moment.
Alderman Taylor?
Thank you. Josh, on that land acquisition for that, why isn't that happening? I don't see that happening in the city on any other projects.
This is a DOT project, and we do not have much choice in this matter. It's, in order to have the DOT do the project, they have to do it by their standards, and their standards require them to have the TLEs purchased. You know, a lot of times when we do a city project, we'll do a construction permit, which allows us to do minor construction on private property through the city. You know, it's something that we allow ourselves to do, but the DOT actually requires the TLEs. You know, so we did use construction permits on Main Street to go onto private property. However, the DOT has their own set of regulations and rules that they have to follow.
It's certainly unfortunate that the DOT doesn't have a lot of common sense that we would have a bike lane for one block
Alderman
And-
Taylor, could we keep our comments to the borrowing proposal before us?
And it's about the land acquisition borrowing here.
It is, but
That's
not
what-
about bike lanes.
And that's why the land acquisition is because of the bike lanes.
Moving on, is there
The
another
back of the
question?
sidewalks are not moving, so therefore this is not related to bike lanes at all. It's just relating to the grading that's necessary behind the sidewalks to match where it needs to be in the private property. So it's not related to bike lanes.
Now, that's why they're taking 2 feet of the terrace on each side. When we look up at that burn building Alderman Seven talked about, you know, we're putting $1,384 onto the borrowing package here. I mean, that should just be taken out of the fire budget. We should remove that, and something should be removed, and it probably costs us more to borrow that money for that period of time than that $1,300 for that burnt building. The Jefferson Park scoreboard, $6,583. That should be taken out of the park budget. We shouldn't be borrowing. And I know Director Tunke, who's not here, had mentioned that there was some sponsorship level. People put their names on those scoreboards to help pay for them. So that's another item that should be in the borrowing packet here. Josh, I know you weren't here with the capital equipment, Calumet County emergency siren. At one point, we put that in the budget, and I think we taxed the community on $40,000 for that siren. Is that correct?
Director Jacobs might be able to address that.
See, we should get a second microphone.
The amount did not show up going through our CIP fund last year, so I could not find the $40,000. I don't know if it was something that was delayed for some reason. I do not know, but it did not show up in the audit anywhere of being purchased. It was in the part of the plan that was adopted back in November of 2016, but it was not something that was purchased. So I didn't have any record of it, so it was not a capital asset that I added to the accounting records for the city. So I don't know if maybe the mayor or somebody else knows a little bit more information on that.
That was added to the levy back then, wasn't it?
No, this was in the CIP. It was supposed to be included in the borrowing program for 2017's budget.
Okay.
That was adopted in November of 16.
Mayor Merkes might want to address that as well.
The emergency siren was placed in TIF 9 and 12, and it was not purchased because we could not get an agreement to operate the siren, and we did not have someone to operate it at that point. So the siren was never purchased, it was never taxed for because it was in one of the TIFs, it was not in the general fund.
Thank you.
Let's see, I had a couple more here. You were given the overall numbers here. Currently, what is our steam debt?
I think that's something that a lot of folks might be curious about, and perhaps Director Jacobs might be willing to put together a memo for the next meeting.
Correct, I can bring that for the council
Okay,
meeting
thanks. I
on
appreciate
the first meeting in August.
Okay.
I have the annual amount that we're paying, and I know how many years we have left. I just don't have the breakout of how much is just the steam plant versus everything else.
It'd be nice for the public to get that breakdown by the
Sure.
next meeting. Thank you. Thanks for that suggestion. On the Bryn Building, final amount, 50% city cost, $50,000, $668. What is that for?
You were the most involved with it.
I wanted to explain.
That was when the city crews broke into the underground vault of the Bryn Building. We came to an agreement, I think it was last October or November, to split the cost 50-50 between city and the Bryn Building. So I think we had a construction was roughly $100,000, and then there was some engineering and also some city costs regarding that. So that's what that number entails.
All right, thanks for refreshing my memory on that. And on the Mill Street terminus, Director John, is there still dollars left in that? There's a $58,000 or $58,000 that we're borrowing. I thought we had a donation for $65,000 for that. That was going to cover that project.
There was, the amount you see here is the amount and there was a carry forward amount. Ballpark, I think it was like about $28,000 left over of the money. So what you see here is just the city's share. It does not include the donation amount that we received, that we have a commitment from the bank, from one of our banks, financial institutions, to pay that. We have not billed them for that portion yet. And then there was also, I think, one or two other donations that the city had received. So this is the city's net share of that project. And it actually, the budget amount was actually higher than that. I think it was like more like about 65,000 or maybe 68,000. It was higher than that. So this is the net amount, and it is actually lower, including the carry forward amount, is actually lower than what the original budget was adopted at.
Was that part of the $225,000 for the walkway and for the Mill Street terminus?
The $225,000, that's for the Little Lake Trestle. That was.
No, I'm talking the original, with the Mill Street terminus and the walkthrough, all that was kind of tied together in $225,000, I believe, for that project.
No, it wasn't anything close to that, of what the budget amount was for that project.
Okay. Well, this is going to go to council yet. I could talk to you about that. Thank you. And I had something on the ponds. Let's see, where did I put that? On Providence Terrace, was there, the Community Way, TIF 12, $13,000, what was that? What is that for?
Your ponds is right here. That's what you're looking for.
The $13,210 for Community Way is for engineering of Community Way. It's going to run between County Highway LP, where the Community First Bank is going in, over to the subdivision at Christella Drive. So that's for the engineering of that road, as well as some CSMs that need to be done. And then I believe later on, I know that you had mentioned the pond subdivision, and that was for work that's being done currently. You guys had just approved that contract, I believe, either last meeting or 2 meetings ago.
Okay, was that for sidewalks, curb, gutter, streets? Okay.
Yes.
And was that for concrete streets?
Asphalt streets.
Asphalt, okay, thank you. That's all.
And just so everyone here is aware, these are items that were budgeted for, approved in the budget by the Common Council, the regular budget, and both the CIP budget. So these are items that were listed out, debated, and approved in each of those. Alderman Rapella. Now, I'm going to turn you back on. Don't touch anything. There you go.
All right, thank you very much. John, was there a chance to get a cheaper rate than 4.25? I don't know if you did or not. I wasn't listening.
The state gives you options for the interest rate depending on what length of term. If you would have gone up to 11 to 20-year maturity on it, it would have been 4.5%.
Oh.
If we would have, so it's like tiers. So you're like from 0, like for 1 year to 5 years is one interest rate, 6 to 10 is another, and then like 11 to 20 is another. So the thing is, I selected the one kind of in the middle because you typically have had, and we want to keep the affordability, and you want to send a message to Moody's, one of the bond rating agencies out there. You don't want to have some of this debt on projects that actually their useful life is going to be beyond 10 years, so you want to have it paid off as quick as possible. And we only should be borrowing for projects that we can afford to do. And that's what you have listed, you've done prioritization at budget time to do these projects.
Okay.
And I've identified different funding sources to do some of these donations, grants,
Sure.
et cetera.
Boy, if my grandma was in charge, she said never buy anything unless you have cash for it. Debt, 31 million, when do you foresee that to be paid off? I know we're going from 80% to 56%, from 213 to 217, but when do you foresee the 31 million paid off?
Right now, with the existing debt, and even with the new debt that would be added on with this tonight, the last year's payment would occur, the principal would occur in 2034, which is 1.8 million. So you've got,
Nothing.
so it goes out to that period of time.
Nothing new till 2034, gentlemen and ladies. Okay, next thing. Scoreboards, basketball hoops, those things, I agree with James. There should have been public fundings, or are they taken out of the rec budget, those type of things. They should not be out of our capital budget. $407,000 for the building, build out a Harbor Place. What does $407,000 do for us?
That was to totally move the whole offices here for the health department, which was moved from the bank location on the corner of 3rd and Racine. Nancy, I have the right address. I never went past it when you were there. When I moved to town, it was always showing vacancy, so it still is, I think. And then moving all the city hall offices from 1st, 2nd, 3rd floors and the basement. I've heard you had employees in the basement there, so moving them all here, having all of us on one floor, try to be more efficient. The thing is, when I first looked at your budget, before I even took the job, I saw that how sweet of a deal that you actually got to move into relatively new office space and have functional committee rooms, boardroom areas, meeting rooms and things at a very affordable, roughly like $75,000 annual rent. You would never have gotten a debt service payment if you would have built something and paid it off over 20 years. Your debt payment, if you ever would have moved to a new city hall building, would have been much higher than that on an annual basis.
So how much rent do we pay per month here or per year?
It's about $70,000 to $75,000 annually is what the payment is.
Didn't we have a building that we had paid off? Yep. And so now we pay $75,000 a year. Like,
It's in the annual.
Alderman Rapella.
How many years do we have to pay this?
Point of order, Alderman Kruger.
We're getting off subject.
I'm sorry, I just need to know these things. How many years do we have to keep paying this rent?
Alderman Rapella.
She don't want you to know.
Oh,
She voted for it.
Alderman Kruger has called a point of order that we are getting off topic. I
Okay.
agree. Let's keep our discussion to the borrowing resolution. If you have other questions,
Yes, I do.
feel free to call staff anytime.
okay, DOT. I know they're getting is the DOT paying that money back to these people on Broad Street, or is the city paying the money back to these people? If the DOT wants the land, why don't they pay it?
The land acquisition for Broad Street is 100% city funds. It was not included with the original state municipal agreement or the revised state municipal agreement. So that is 100% city funds. Again, it's one of the things that you have to deal with when you accept DOT funding is that they have their design standards and their way of dealing with things, and one of them is that they do require the TLEs, which do cost money. So we are still getting a pretty good deal. I mean, we're still getting, I think it's roughly $850,000 in funding, and we're going to end up spending somewhere around, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's going to be significantly less than that. So.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for helping me with this budget and these type of things that we don't have the money to pay for. Thank you.
And at this point, we are still looking for a motion to forward to council. Alderman Sevenick?
Thank you. I still have questions. I'll just echo what our Director of Public Works said, and that the Broad Street project is a blessing. We are fortunate to receive those fundings, and our cost is, in comparison to the total project, is minimal. So that's a very good project. Earlier, the chair kind of told us that this is already 2017, 2018 CIP program that we approved and was already approved in budget, but that doesn't mean squat. We can still make any kind of change that we want at any time, because if we only stick to what was budgeted or what was voted on before and things change, are you telling me that we got to stick to what we originally budgeted? Or that's why we're here, because things do change. And so we're not quick to vote on it. This isn't a rubber stamp up here. And I very much respect council members asking questions, especially if they're not certain. This is the place to do it. So continue to ask your questions if you need to. And like the chair said too, you always have the option of calling staff.
Attorney Captain,
The other
could you
thing,
address that?
excuse me, I have the floor, please. The other thing that I had forgotten earlier was the, in your memo, John, you have addressed some issues with the public works facilities. The area between the 30 and 40 years you kind of addressed. Can you explain and address that a little differently than, you know, as far as the difference with our borrowing that's before us today?
Sure. What we are looking at is that we have an opportunity to do a borrowing longer than state statute allows through beyond a 20-year general obligation debt. That is the limit by state statute that the city can borrow, nothing longer than 20 years. However, through the USDA federal loan program, we could actually go out as long as 40 years if we wanted to. And it might make sense to consider that as an option, because for the needs of the department to function efficiently going forward in the next generation cycle, to have a facility that will be somewhere upward of $8 to $9 million, you would want to be able to pay that off over the useful life of the facility. And obviously, the facility should last longer than 10 years or 20 years. So therefore, it's an option to consider. Also, the interest rate that the federal USDA loan program has is lower than what the state is offering right now for a 20-year or 10-year borrowing issue. They were offering something less than 4%. But they are very restrictive on what types of debt you can go and apply for to go down that road. Public facilities, especially for public works buildings, is definitely in something that we've met with them already. However, we need a formal design, an approved design to kind of go down that road. So that's something that we will need to work on over the next couple months, but we need to go through that and try to get the cost within something that would be definitely reasonable for the city to be able to finance over something longer than a 20-year general obligation borrowing plan. So that's kind of why we're looking at another option. We need a little more time. We hope we can lock the interest rate in possibly at the end of the third quarter, because their rate at the federal level does get relooked at the beginning of each quarter. So we're trying to head off any rate increase that might come in October by trying to have a formal design done by staff and by the engineering firm, bring it to the council for approval before we can go ahead and submit that to the USDA loan program for eligibility going forward. So that's kind of where we stand right now.
You're looking at bringing that later on, or?
This is correct, yes.
And when I mean later on, I mean like within the next few months here?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Attorney Captain, could you address the issue of whether or not we can change things?
Well, if projects have already been completed, there has to be a way to pay for them.
And as stated before, these projects have already been completed, correct, Director Jacobs?
Everything for 2017 that you had on the list has been completed. Or if I noted for it as a carry forward, like the Mill Street Terminus, that was one on the list that you had approved, that there was a request to have additional unused funds. And like I said before, it was at a lower cost than what than what the original budget had been adopted at.
Thank you. Alderman Kruger.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I'd like to make the motion to approve R-21-18, a resolution approving application to Board of Commissioners of Public Lands to borrow $3,890,000 from the state trust funds and authorizing the borrowing and issuance of certificates of indebtedness and levying the tax in connection wherewith, introduced by Mayor Merkes.
We have a motion from Alderman Kruger. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second from
For the sake of discussion.
Alderman Severnick. I believe Alderman Taylor was next.
Thank you, Chair. There were some questions asked by different aldermen, and, you know, this is going to the council in 2 weeks, so you have ample time to get your questions asked here. And I myself, I'm going to stay consistent. I didn't vote for the budget, and I didn't vote for some of these items, so I'm not going to vote for this.
Alderman Severnick.
The city attorney is very clever. She's an attorney, so she knows how to use her words, and her words were, we have to pay for this. We all know that. It doesn't have to be borrowed for, though. Okay? So, I mean, if we wanted to, we could take some of these out and choose a different mechanism for borrowing. And I think that's what some of the aldermen were suggesting, although I feel that this is the best and correct way of doing it. But just don't think that everything is a rubber stamp around here. And not only that, but also we're also talking and discussing here the 2018 capital borrowing estimates too. So that way, the statements that I had said earlier were correct.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Motion carried at roll call 5-2.
And with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before we do, I have a question about the protocol here. 5-2. Does it take a 2/3 vote? Is 5-2 a 2/3 vote? I believe it takes a 2/3 vote. We have an absent member here.
Attorney Captain.
There was no budget adjustment that I recall hearing. This is just a majority is what would be needed to
Okay.
approve a resolution.
To approve a resolution, but it takes a 2/3 vote to borrow. And that's what the resolution is doing. So I think, obviously, this is being recommended to the council. This isn't a council vote yet. This is just an administration. I don't think it takes a 2/3 in administration. But I would hope that if it does take a 2/3 vote, that the council members that were not happy maybe get their answers taken care of before the next meeting, so that we don't have this as an issue where we don't have a funding mechanism. Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn and a second by Alderman Tom Grady. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.